You know what's strange? If you grew up in the 80s or 90s, you probably remember what it felt like to be completely bored. Not scrolling through your phone bored, actually bored. Sitting in your room staring at the ceiling, waiting for something to happen. And here's the thing, nothing did happen. You just sat there. And eventually you figured something out on your own. People who grew up without the internet carry this really specific mindset into adulthood. It's not about being old or out of touch. It's about how your brain learned to solve problems when there was no quick answer waiting at your fingertips. When the world moved slower. When you had to figure things out yourself because nobody was going to Google it for you. And that difference shows up everywhere. If you're Gen X, you probably notice this about yourself. When something breaks, you try to fix it. When you don't know something, your first instinct isn't always to search for it. You sit with the question for a while, you think about it, you try things, and sometimes you just accept that you won't know the answer right away. That's not laziness. It's actually a completely different operating system. Here's what was happening during those years. Your brain was developing during a time when waiting was normal. When you wanted to know something, you had to go to a library, or ask someone who might know, or flip through an encyclopedia, or just wait until you stumbled across the answer someday. Your brain learned that information doesn't arrive instantly. That patience is just part of the process. And when you were bored, you had to entertain yourself. There were no endless videos or apps or games in your pocket, so you wandered around outside. You made up games. You called a friend on a landline and hoped they were home. You read the same book 3 times. You got creative because there was no other option. Psychologists call this kind of experience low-stimulus childhood. It just means your brain got used to longer stretches of nothing, and that taught you something most people today never learn: how to be okay with empty time. What's actually happening behind the scenes is pretty interesting. Your brain built really strong networks for independent problem solving, because when you needed to figure something out, you couldn't outsource it to a search engine. You had to use trial and error. You had to experiment. You had to sit with frustration and keep trying anyway. That's why a lot of Gen X people today are weirdly good at figuring things out without instructions. It's not a special skill. It's just what your brain practiced for years. But here's the part nobody talks about. That same mindset can feel isolating now, because the world runs on instant answers, on constant connection, on asking the internet before you ask yourself. And if your first instinct is to work through something alone, people might think you're being distant, or stubborn, or like you don't want help. But that's not what's happening. You just learned to rely on yourself first, because for most of your childhood, that's all you had. Think about how you made plans back then. If you wanted to meet a friend, you set a time and a place and you showed up. If they didn't show up, you waited, or you left. There was no way to text and say, running late. No way to check in halfway there. You just trusted that the plan would work, and if it didn't, you dealt with it. That built something in you that's hard to explain to someone who's never experienced it. A kind of self-reliance that doesn't need constant reassurance. You're okay not knowing where everyone is all the time. You're okay making a decision and sticking with it, even if you can't verify it instantly. And here's where it gets interesting. Research on attention and focus shows that people who grew up without smartphones have a different relationship with distraction. Your brain didn't get trained to expect a notification every few minutes, so you can still sit with one thing for a long time without needing to switch. You can read a whole book. You can work on a project for hours. You're not wired to constantly check if something better is happening somewhere else. That's not because you're more disciplined. It's because your brain never learned that pattern in the first place. But there's a flip side. You might also feel a little disconnected from how the world works now. Like everyone else is moving faster, and you're still trying to figure out the old way. Like you're supposed to be available all the time, but part of you still believes that being unreachable is normal. And maybe you've noticed this. You're not great at small talk over text. You'd rather have one real conversation than 100 quick check-ins. You don't really understand why people need to share everything instantly. It's not that you're judging anyone. It's just that your brain learned a different rhythm, a slower one. One where not everything needs to be documented or shared or responded to right away. That rhythm still lives in you. And honestly, that's not a weakness. It's a kind of resilience that's getting rarer. Because you know how to sit with uncertainty. You know how to be alone without feeling lonely. You know that not every question needs an immediate answer. And you know that sometimes, the best way to solve a problem is to step away and let your brain work on it quietly in the background. The world today doesn't reward that mindset much. Everything is optimized for speed, for instant feedback, for constant connection. And if you don't operate that way, it's easy to feel like you're doing something wrong, like you're falling behind, like you should be more responsive, more available, more plugged in. But here's the truth. You're not behind. You're just wired differently, and that wiring has real value. Because while everyone else is drowning in information and notifications and choices, you still know how to think for yourself. You still know how to be patient. You still remember what it feels like to just exist without needing to broadcast it. That's not nostalgia. That's a skill. It's a kind of mental quiet that most people today are desperate to find. They meditate and do digital detoxes and try to unplug, all to feel what you already know how to feel naturally. You grew up in a time when the world was smaller and slower, when you had to make your own fun, when you had to trust yourself because there was no algorithm telling you what to do next. And your brain still carries that. It shows up in how you solve problems, in how you make decisions, in how you spend your time. It shows up in the fact that you can still be bored without panicking, that you can still sit with a question and not need the answer right this second, that you can still have a thought without needing to share it immediately. And maybe that makes you feel a little out of step sometimes, like you're from a different era, but that doesn't mean you're stuck in the past. It just means you have something most people are trying to get back to, a kind of independence, a kind of calm, a kind of trust in yourself that doesn't need constant validation from the outside world. That's what growing up without the internet gave you. Not a disadvantage, just a different way of being, a quieter way, a slower way, a way that still makes sense, even if the world has moved on. And maybe that's worth holding on to. Because the ability to think for yourself, to sit with discomfort, to trust your own process, that never goes out of style. It just becomes more valuable the rarer it gets. There's a lot more to explore about how early experiences shape the way we see the world today. How the things we learned as kids become the instincts we carry as adults. How differences in timing create completely different ways of thinking. But that's a whole other conversation.